Welcome, everybody, to IMC Live, the interactive webinar series hosted by the Industrial Marketing Collective. We are here to help you make connections, learn, and get results for your business. I'm Peyton Warren, and I am the marketing director at the industrial marketing agency Gorilla 76, and I am one of your IMC Live hosts. And Alan, I'm stoked for today because we have some friends joining our show. And our topic is going to be one that is one that kind of feels like you're sometimes speaking a foreign language, which is whenever we're trying to talk to engineers and then like translate that into something that other engineers can jump into and utilize.
Yeah, I think it's
We've
mostly
got,
Greek.
it's Greek, yeah. Latin, something like that. So we've got two experts joining us to help us translate all of that, and that would be TREW Marketing Senior Content Strategist Jamie Tokarz and Senior Brand and Content Strategist Morgan Norris. So Morgan, Jamie, hello, welcome.
Hello, thanks for having us.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks for being here.
Yeah, we get to work with TREW Marketing a lot actually over here at Gorilla because we're partnering on the Industrial Marketing Summit. So our two agencies have been collaborating for the last 2 years on that. Yeah, so super excited. Looking forward to seeing you guys in Austin in like 20 days.
Yeah, it's coming up.
I'm not freaking out. Don't worry. Well, yeah, Morgan and Jamie, like I said, we've gotten to know you guys quite well, but I'd love for you to just kind of tell the group here a little bit more about yourselves and kind of your backgrounds, and then we can kind of jump in further.
Yeah, so I'll go first. My name's Morgan. I see some of you that I know. Ellen, Nate, good to see you guys. But I have spent my whole career doing this, studied PR actually in school, and initially out of school started working for National Instruments. And that was a lot of our agency came out of National Instruments, but there did public relations and then content development. Actually worked closely, sat next to Jamie for a long time there. So we worked together for a really long time. But from there came over to TREW Marketing, and we work exclusively with really technical companies selling complex products and solutions. So lots of system integrators, and then lots of super high end electronic components. Think like lots of people make capacitors, but the 2% of capacitors that are the ones responsible for making sure your car engine starts and stops correctly for its whole lifetime. So it's like those kind of upper end technologies. And I do brand and content development for them. A lot of our projects start with a brand project. Companies come to us and they'll say, great, we need some kind of content. We're not sure. We need a plan. We need it all written. And then we say, do you know who you are? And you get 10 different answers from 10 different people. And so we start with a messaging project and get everybody in the room, kind of a bit of a therapy project, and say, who are you? And what are we trying to do here? And get everybody aligned and some external messages that way, and then develop content plans and write content that communicates that message to their audiences.
No big deal.
Yeah.
And Jamie, the content writing is really where you come into play, huh?
That's right. Yeah. So very similar path to Morgan, as she mentioned. I also studied public relations and journalism in college and then advertising in grad school. So a lot of different areas of marketing and writing, and started at National Instruments, where that was my first exposure to the highly technical side. And it was just super interesting because, every day, everything is always very different. You're always learning. And that is something that has really kept me in the technical writing field for, about 2 decades at this point. But I've been with TREW now for almost 10 years. And as Morgan mentioned, yeah, or you mentioned too, I'm working on the content development side. So think everything from ebooks and white papers to blog posts, web pages, and social content.
Yeah, now I love about all the different backgrounds that people tend to come from in this field. I was a former journalism person. So what did you all learn from your PR background that has really been useful?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a lot of making sure we're keeping kind of relationships and tabs on what's still going on in PR. I've kind of gotten back for clients to a little bit of PR because with all the changes in search and stuff, we're finding technical publications fit this really great sweet spot where editors or engineers really value what they see in technical publications. They value that third party credibility, and search engines are starting to really pull in technical publications because they're reputable new sources of information. And so been able to kind of go back and put that PR hat back on as we move through different ways to promote companies. But definitely PR teaches you like you got to lead with the most important facts. And that is, I remember being in college and like they're like, write a news release about this pet adoption place that's, you know, having an event to adopt a cat in Austin. And I was trying to tell this story of like, you know, how impactful it would be to own a cat. I failed the assignment, and my professor was like, you got to lead with like the facts. We want people to come to this event. We got to lead with like what it is and where it is and when it is. And engineers are the same way, right? Like, yes, there's a time to tell a story, but it's after they're looking for a bit more information. They want an answer. And so you've got to communicate that really quickly and clearly, and whether it's short or long form content.
Yeah, to use the journalism term, the inverted pyramid model.
Yes, yes, yes. No one wanted to hear my cat story, so
I'm sure it was a lovely cat story, though.
yeah,
Everyone's
used-
always got a soft spot for the shelter animals.
Yeah,
right.
I used to get those briefs all the time when I was editing the newspaper. I'm sure I would have enjoyed that one.
Yeah, yeah. You wouldn't have. You would have thrown it out because it was long-winded at the beginning.
But so heartfelt.
Yeah, right.
So, with all of your background, I'm also curious, like, what the heck was in the water with National Instruments? How'd you guys get all started there? But maybe a story for another time.
They paid. They paid communications interns. They were like the only place in Austin where, as a communications student, you could get a paid internship.
Heck
Everywhere
yeah.
else, you had to work for free. So if you got one of those like coveted spots, a lot they hired out of their intern pool a lot. So
Okay. All right. Paid internships. If you're early in your career, sorry, my dogs are barking. I'll hand it to Alan to jump in with our first question.
Yeah, I don't think that we could hear it anyway, though. So I think you were good, Peyton. But anyway, so let's jump in the topic a bit here. So how do you go about preparing for interviews and like enhancing the work dynamic when it comes to working with engineers? You know, they can be a notoriously prickly bunch.
I'll jump in first here. So I think you like the word preparing is an excellent word to start with, because I think that the preparation that goes into an SME conversation is essential, because you need to start by setting expectations, because I think that engineers in general are a little bit skeptical, right? So if you are showing them right up front, not just, we're writing this piece of content. It's more about establishing beforehand, like the goals, the reasons you're doing it, the purpose of the content, the intended audience, really providing that information up front. And, a lot of times that's through an email, and then it just develops an understanding of the why. Why are we doing this piece? And it's going to make that conversation, and when they have all that background, just go a lot more smoothly.
Yeah, I've got one quick follow-up on that one, where we've kind of had a balancing act on that, where we find that when we over prepare or we like give too much of an outline, the engineers also over prepare, and perhaps we get off track a little bit more easily. So is there any kind of or how do you think about that potential problem, I guess?
Yeah, well, also, I think that it also means going into the sourcing session with, if there's an over-prepared mindset of, well, great, let's use this to focus more on a content plan, not just a piece. And sometimes out of that conversation, if you're going in thinking you might be writing a blog post or two, well, they might bring up an example that could turn into a case study. And then, there might be some corresponding LinkedIn posts. So it's more about that overarching content strategy, I think, when that happens, rather than, it's like, oh, we just have too much information now.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and to your point of them being over prepared, Alan, I think we always try and go in and have a conversation. I try and get them off of their notes. Like we'll send over questions beforehand, but then I want to have a conversation. And if you can kind of get them loosened up a little bit to where they're just talking about, this project that they're deeply involved in and care about a ton, you can start to get the kind of details out of their head that you're not going to get in there, like if they just answered like a questionnaire, get them kind of talking and churning on what's important about this, why are we excited about it, and how's it going to change your customers and the way they work and things like that.
Yeah, you can tell when you've got them off script and they're not reading their notes anymore, and that feels good.
Yeah.
So I think like another piece of this is like, when you are preparing is you have to think about like what your end goal is too. So like, yeah, content planning would be good. But like if you are getting like there's a sliver of their time and like you've got a very specific objective, you know, you're preparing to kind of like steer the conversation in a particular direction so that you can complete that technical article or like that piece. So like I think a big piece of like the preparation would also be thinking about like what are you trying to write in the first place, and like what do the engineers really want to like see? What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, we definitely go in ideally, that engineer is involved one step back when we do kind of the big content plan. And they're there when we say, hey, it sounds like these are your personas, these are the marketing goals we're trying to achieve. And so here's the content we recommend. Okay, we're going to do a series of articles that we'll pitch and place in a trade publication. What are those articles going to be about? We'll loosely develop those topics. And then when we go to sit with them, they can recall that conversation. They can go, oh yeah, this is part of a bigger plan. This article is about, this specific material that goes on a capacitor and makes it super humidity resistant, which is going to be perfect for car engine testing, electric vehicles, whatever. And so I think that kind of keeping that focus then helps, right? And then you go in with, you kind of have this loosely, generally outlined, you've done some research, what types of articles this is going to sit next to in that trade publication. Like you've got your head around that, how technical it needs to be. Like, there are some, say we're going to write an article, there are some trade publications, they're going to want mathematical equations in there, right? So I'm not going to leave that sourcing session before I know we've gotten to like that level of technical depth in our discussion. But there's other ones where it might be like, this is going to be a high level kind of trends piece. And so we're going to go about that and kind of I'll have it out, you have that outlined in your head. We're going to hit these 3 trends. Talk to me about what this looks like for you, how you've seen this with customers, and start kind of exploring those routes. But I definitely think kind of having an end goal and a little bit of a framed out outline of the sections you're trying to hit in that meeting is helpful.
And have any of the new AI tools helped you with that preparation and dealing with all of that doctorate level technical content?
Yeah, I would say definitely. I think one of the big advantages of new AI tools is that preparation stage. It's helped like you can almost have a conversation before your conversation, like with some of the AI tools of like, okay, here's some of the questions I'm thinking of asking, or help me develop the questions for this topic and kind of set that stage a little bit more beforehand. It also helps with just the background on your side for like, let's say, we know that in the engineering world, there's a lot of acronyms, but those acronyms might have 5 different meanings depending on what exactly you're doing. So getting yourself more familiar with just that language that you need to be speaking during that conversation, again, all on the preparation side.
Yeah, I was dealing with acronyms just yesterday. Like this could be one of three things.
That's right.
Yeah, I feel like acronyms are so hard for SEO too. It's like how do you win in like an acronym game like that? It's like you've got to spell it out. Ugh. I don't know actually, like what, like, because it's like some of these acronyms, it's like they're redundant with other industries, they're redundant with like government agencies or whatever. It's like,
Yeah. When you're writing content though, that engineer will know, and you can ask them, are we gonna look like we don't know what we're talking about if we spell this out first,
mm,
or like you would never spell out input output. You would always just abbreviate that IO. And so just talking with those engineers and going, what's the industry standard for you when you're talking to the person who this piece of content is geared towards?
Yeah, that speaks to like the higher level voice of customer for the engineer. And so what are the other like, let's say top three unique challenges when it comes to speaking to an engineering audience that are like that?
That's a good question. So top three challenges when speaking to an engineering audience, I would say getting to that point first is huge. And then we need technical data, which
mm,
sounds like easy, but it's so easy to talk about, well, this is fast. This cable is going to make all of each interaction between the machine and the processing tool faster. How much faster, right? Pushing for that quantification. Once I have that quantification, now I have a story to tell, right? But we're often pushing for that. I feel like that can be a challenge. And then getting that wording right. I mean, this is the reason why if you were selling socks, you can have AI write your product overview of socks. We all know what socks are and what they do. But if you're writing an overview of a really technical system, you can't. That's your proprietary system. That the reason that system is so great is because you guys built it and built it so specifically. And so we've got to have those details and the wording kind of right around it, which means we need to write this, and then we need to have that subject matter expert then review our content. And so if you ever try to chase down someone and have them review something, that can be really difficult. So much
yeah,
content sitting there waiting, right?
yeah, just like on the bench.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, speaking of that, I mean, it's like, great, yeah, you've got the piece. Now you can't even use it until it's been like fact checked, right? So how are
right.
you guys going through that process of like making sure you're 100% accurate and maybe lightening the load,
Yeah,
engineers so that that review happens?
right. When we were at NI, the product marketing teams and stuff were in a different building, and you would go, like, if you had something that needed reviewed and somebody is not getting back to you, you go print it out and you would go sit at their desk till they came back from a meeting. Look at their calendar, you're like, looks like they'll be back at their desk at 3 o'clock. And then here you are, like, you're like, all right, great, fancy meeting you here. I need you to check these packs. And so that doesn't work as well when we're in a virtual environment or separated from clients, but it is, I think, figuring out how that client works best. Like, I have clients who will not answer my emails. They're just not going to. But if I schedule a meeting, they will come to it. And in that meeting, I'm like, great, glad I have you here. I need 10 minutes. Here's this document up on the screen, and I have highlighted exactly what I need you to look at. I need you to look at this paragraph. Everything else, we're good, but I want to make sure this context is correct and these details are correct here. That's it. So I don't need them. And you don't want an engineer like picking apart your wording of things, but really highlighting those specific pieces that you need them to review, I think.
Yeah,
Jamie.
I was gonna say, I think one of the key or maybe two keywords here are structure and systems. And I'm also married to an engineer, so this is just like my life all the time is like systems, like Morgan is talking about, like work great. It creates that focus and it's just going to end up like being more effective. Even if the way you have to do that for different SMEs is different, it's learning what works best and creating, like I said, a system.
Yeah, I'm sure that it saves you 90% of your trouble whenever you don't let the engineers read and edit all the copy.
Yeah, don't do that.
The semantics of grammar with an engineer that gets painful.
Yeah.
Um, so how do you all balance the obvious need for the technical content with this audience with the probably equally necessary need to maintain that human element? You know, they're people
Mhm.
too, after all. So what are the ways that you kind of keep that point system in your head of that balancing act?
Yeah, like retain a voice almost.
Mhm. Do you want to take that one, Jamie?
Sure. So I think that, I mean, you kind of like said it right there with like remembering like we're all people, and this is part of where the AI tools like are not necessarily the best thing to be using because people do want content that's human. Like we need to be authentic in what we're talking about. And we just need to remember what their key care abouts are that we've been talking about. It's that data, it's those real world examples. It's the, it's not using like superlative words. I get that phrase a lot. Like, let's cut out the superlative words that don't really mean anything. It's really just remembering to speak to the audience in the way that is going to resonate well with them. And that can change depending on if you're on your website versus in your LinkedIn profile. And I think that's something to keep in mind too. And I was just talking with a client about this recently. Like they were like, we want to be very to the point on our website, but we want to have a little fun in our LinkedIn profile and show that we have a personality too. And so I think that's important to remember that depending on where they're seeing you and your content and that message, it might be a little different too.
Yeah, and I feel like in my experience, the biggest miss that I see most often in the engineering oriented content just out in the wild is forgetting to provide the so what. Like you'll get all these really technical details and all these things, but they forget to say, and you want all of this because.
Yeah, here's what it's going to help you do.
Yes,
Hmm.
that's really important too. The why should you care? Is it going to make your job easier or, is it something that you've like just yeah, you've been searching for 10 years and we have the answer now.
Hmm. Yeah,
The
absolutely.
difference in content that's written by an engineer and technical content that's written with an engineer by a marketer. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I think,
sorry, go ahead,
I
Morgan.
think, I think too, a lot of times we start, like I'm saying, these projects with a brand messaging project, and that allows us to identify a corporate tone and voice that's carried through all the content. And just because a company is technical doesn't mean it just falls into this one bucket of here's how its writing should sound. Um, I always like to will interview customers during that process and get an idea from their customers what it's like to work with them. And I always like to take that those kind of details and figure out how we can wrap that into the content. And what I mean is this, if a company is we'll have clients that you talk to their customers and they're really well known for, man, they pick up the phone anytime. They have an answer to every question. They are like to the point. We always get exactly what we need, like right when we need it. And so if I'm writing content for that company, if I'm developing their kind of corporate tone, it's gonna be really um like pain point centered from the start. We're gonna always communicate. We understand what you're facing right now, and here's the way to solve it. And it's gonna be sound very reassuring and have that kind of trusted tone to it. Because then if somebody's experiencing content like that and then they get in touch with that company because they might want to work with them, the experience they're gonna have is gonna feel like that too. And it's all gonna come together and feel like a brand. But those things like come to play in the content that you're creating. So if you work for a company, make sure you take the time to sit and think about what your brand attributes are and what your tone and voice should be in your content. And then when you develop that, Jamie can write content in that tone and voice. I can write content in that tone and voice. Different people can write content. It shouldn't be my voice in a technical article. It should be a combination of the corporate tone and voice and that specific engineer if there's going to be a byline on it.
Yeah, I feel like that's when you can really tell when a company is leaning on their engineers for the writing as well as
Hmm.
the technical expertise, because every blog will sound completely different depending on who they have
Yeah,
reading it.
yeah, yeah.
It doesn't make for the best reading experience
It
necessarily.
doesn't. No.
So
Uh,
you've mentioned like blogs, we've mentioned publications. Where do you feel like the best place is to distribute your content that you're writing, like these technical pieces?
It's changing. It's always changing. It used to be all your website. You want everything on your website. And what we're seeing is website traffic is decreasing but leads are not. So the right people, less people are coming, but the right people are coming. So that's okay. But you want content in multiple places. Somebody just mentioned niche industry channels, which is perfect. LinkedIn articles, trade publications, any kind of like if you're part of any like standards bodies or organizations like that, like CSIA, anything you can do there, trade show papers. So it's, you've got to diversify and get stuff out as much as you've got to just put it on your site and wait for people to come.
Yeah, I think to add to that, it's like what we're saying is building like that like brand authority in multiple places,
Hmm.
especially as like more people are starting searches with AI tools. So AI driven search is growing. So like establishing that brand authority and like you know, you have a contributed article, but you might talk about the same topic on a podcast and then that transcript lives out there potentially, or you know, have a guest blog on another site if that's possible, and you know link to that too. So it's about establishing that brand credibility in multiple places too. So there's a it's kind of that strategy of like being everywhere because people aren't just coming to your site anymore. You want to ultimately end up like Morgan said with that right traffic at your site.
Yeah.
And Dale had a good question in the chat I wanted to bring up. But how are you all thinking about making sure you don't release proprietary, I'm sorry, blah, information? It's still more.
Yeah. So you've got to use a paid AI tool that keeps so that your information isn't feeding um, their language learning models. So we use Chat GPT. Do we use their
Yeah,
teams?
their
I don't
team's
even
version
know.
that's paid. Yeah.
Um, I think it's like $20 a month per user or something. It's expensive across an organization, but for a few users, it's not. And that is really helpful. One thing that's great about that is you can train different agents on different voices. So if I'm writing for an executive that is gives a lot of presentations, I can go in and maybe I pull 5 or 6 transcripts from presentations he's given and keynotes he's given and
Mm.
drop those all in one like AI stream to train that on his even just like cadence and voice. Because now if I've got to write a 2-minute video script for him to record for some voiceover for a corporate video, I might write that script as best as I can as far as the company goes, and then say, hey, what tweaks would you make to this to make it sound just like his voice? So that when he reads that, he doesn't have any like editing he has to do or very minimal. It's going to already sound like his voice. And so that's a great way to do that.
Yeah, it's a good one. And we've had Sarah, one of our writers here, does that for products where she'll have an entire
Yeah.
ChatGPT thing for a product and how we want to phrase it and talk about it and the benefits and everything. So yeah, there's a lot you can do there. It's pretty handy.
Yeah. And then the other side of it is if you're not working with proprietary information, um, it's not terrible to feed that model stuff about your company. So that public model, right? You don't want to use public chat GPT to help you write a press release about a new product coming up
Yeah.
or but um if you're just kind of messing around and searching around and things like that, it's fine.
Yeah, I've just been thinking about like you were saying like training the tool and training and having just like those words, knowing what your brand needs to sound like. Is it reassuring? Is it like, those are also, if you have your brand like terms, I guess, great ways to help kind of coach the AI.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah. So, sorry,
I was
Paige,
just
go
gonna
on.
say, it's funny. I feel like AI for me used to be something where I was like, oh, that's lazy. Like you're
Yeah.
cheating. You're cheating because you're using AI and you're not doing it yourself. And let me tell you, folks, I have started using it so much more in the past, even just like 6 months, where I feel like it just takes the initial like blank page syndrome away, and then you can do the polish, and it makes like the end result so much stronger because you've cut, like you spend your time now on the polish, on the shine, not on the structure. I mean,
Yeah, and on the research that goes into it too, right? On
mhm.
those acute details that are going to make what you're creating different than some crap. Somebody said it all sounds like a used car salesman, and it does, right? So if you just asked a tool to write something for you, it sounds like you asked a used car salesman to write this thing for you.
Yeah. This is just off the top of my head, but have you all had any issues with the AI being wrong on that technical information? Have you had pretty good luck on that, or are you always needing to
I
fact
see
check
I
the
see
AI too?
Karen shaking her head like,
Yeah.
yes, we've had problems. No, okay. Okay. Karen, I mean, I'd be interested to hear from you too.
I posted in the chat, I have a sales guy who wants to really embellish our 100-year-old products and make them sound better and bigger and bolder. And so he keeps using AI to write them. And then I didn't know he was doing that. I thought he was just rewriting them. And then I'd go back to product managers and say, is this true? And they're like, no, that's not what our product does. That's not true. So then like we were just circling all through this. And I'm like, we're not doing this anymore. But yeah. With especially because when you have people that can sue, we have products that handle gas and can be very scary stuff. And when you have a product go wrong because you've said it's okay for this or that, or it can be used under this temperature, and then something happens, we have to be very, very careful. So that's why I'm like, we're not saying anything, and we can't even make guarantees like exceeds, or we have to always use the helps in there. So yeah, I cannot use that for any technical content at all.
Amy, what have you seen anything in particular in that?
So one interesting example I had recently is I actually had just finished writing a case study for a client, and I was preparing some social posts to promote the case study, and I fed the case study into ChatGPT, and it interpreted the case study completely wrong as far as what they actually did. It just kind of said, oh, you built this whole distributed control system, when actually they did like one single element of that, and it kind of took it and ran with it. And I thought that was actually one of the more extreme examples I've seen, because it's a good tool for getting a starting place, right? You've already wrote the long form content, and now you're going to promote that content. So sometimes, it's good to use it as a starting place. Well, in that case, I started reading it and was like, this is not even a starting place. So it just kind of interpreted the entire project incorrectly, and that was a first, and that was just like last week actually.
Carly, you got a good example for us too?
Yeah, so at Sumitomo, we do power transmission. So a lot of the times when I use AI, when I first started using AI, it kept thinking I was talking about car motors. So because we made our own GPT on the back end, I made sure to include that in the instructions to like ignore anything about cars, trucks, motors, lawnmowers, riding mowers, because that's all the things that it will pull in. Like, yes, power drive solutions to turn on a dime in your lawn. It's like, nope, that's not what we're talking about. So just kind of training the AI to make sure it focuses on everything but that was really helpful. And then also just uploading some of our own documents, catalogs, and brochures
Mhm.
on the back end. So it had a better idea of like what we do. And then since then, I mean, I wrote a lot of technical articles, and yes, go birds. But like I said, unless the engineers aren't reading it, I haven't had anyone come back saying this is terrible. So I'm going to say it's a 10 for 10 or 9 for 10.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear it. And something that I can't believe I didn't think of sooner, my wife actually mentioned this to me, was that it helps to just ask it, like, what else do you need to know to
Yeah.
fill in the, like, is there anything that would help you that I can provide before you give me the results that I'm looking for?
Well,
So,
I
okay, you can
know
go.
we're getting close to the top of the hour, and I feel like we've been touching on pieces of this with voice, and we've been mentioning LinkedIn and like distribution channels uh, to you know, what can we be doing with this content in terms of like building our own like company presence on LinkedIn too? Because I feel like there's like this personal brand angle, and then there's
Mhm.
like the company brand angle. And I feel like what's happened, well, LinkedIn is like constantly promoting these individual voices.
Yeah.
And I guess my question is, should we just lean into that? And should we just continue to like the company will rise with individual voices? Or are you seeing like, no, you still need to invest in this company profile and you can't just ignore it? Like, what's your take?
Yeah. So the company profile needs to be there, but the content that gets traction is content that has some individual perspective to it, right? You can work for a huge company, and huge companies make these announcements, they post them, whatever, who cares? But when a person is then commenting on that, it becomes more valuable. So adding value that way. And Jamie and I are going to do a workshop on this at IMS, but what does it look like to create this network of personal brands within your company? Getting some people around the table and saying, okay, listen, as a company, we are going after digital transformation for the next 3 years. This is what we're going to be talking about. You know, we sell um, mm, like plant floor software that is and going to really change the way that the plant floor works. So we're talking about digital transformation. What does it look like for the CEO to talk about digital transformation? What does it look like for the VP of engineering to talk about it? What does it look like for a sales support guy to talk about digital transformation? And we get those leaders in a room from all different points of the company and say, okay, who, you know, what's your role and what do you do? And what's your message around this topic that supports the whole company? And allowing people to kind of have their own voice in there really will help rise the tide of the brand, because people are looking for commentary from other experts.
Mhm.
It's not just what does the corporate brand say, but what do those individuals say? So that looks like bylined articles, and that looks like you know, the company announces something and then that VP of engineering needs to repost that and or share that and add their own thoughts there, right? Why is this important? Why do you think it's important? um how are you how do you see this changing the way that your customers work?
How involved do you think marketing should be with like the posts themselves, like the coaching, right? Um, but the actual creation.
Yeah, um goes both ways, but for the most part pretty involved. A lot of times there's a barrier for a technical person to be like, no, I'm going to comment on this on LinkedIn. Um, that's not like they might sit at their desk and stew over what they're going to say for 30 minutes. It's not a good use of their time, right? I need to be able to at least give them something to work with. Great, here's text, you can modify this, or, um, you know, you can totally do your own, but if you need a starting point, here it is, because I wrote that press release. Like I've been very involved with that content as well, and I've been involved with that subject matter expert too. But I find that they want a starting point for sure.
Yeah, I think I saw Julia mention a comment in there about like sometimes you run into that hurdle with engineers where they're like, this isn't part of my job. And
Yeah.
it helps get past that too. Like whether it's intimidating to be posting on LinkedIn or they don't feel it's part of their job, it's like, here's a starting point, and this should take you like 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah, that question always amazes me. It's like, well, we sell stuff here, right? And so therefore we're all gonna need to do this.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're getting close to the end of the time now. Alan, any other things we wanted to circle back to? I feel like we covered a lot of ground. I'm now very excited to maybe have another conversation about LinkedIn newsletters and and articles.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we could go on for days and days, but we have to stop somewhere, I suppose.
Well, Morgan and Jamie, I just cannot thank you enough for coming on to the show today and just sharing your wisdom and everything from your backgrounds to today. If folks want to hear more from y'all, where can they do it? Where can they connect?
Yeah, you can find us both on LinkedIn, or Morgan at TREWMarketing.com. And we'll be at IMS too. And like I said, I know for sure some of y'all will be there, but Jamie and I are doing a workshop on personal branding there as well. So
Yeah, and I was trying to keep up with the chat, but if we didn't answer a question, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn or yeah, Jamie at True Marketing or Morgan at True Marketing. So sorry if we did not get to your question.
It's all right. The chat always goes a little bit wild. I missed some things too, I know. Folks, not bad for our second show of the year, right? Not bad. We are super happy to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us again. Our next episode is going to be on February 20th, and we've got an IMC Live regular joining us. Skylar is going to be on the show. And you mentioned digital transformation, Morgan. Skylar is going to talk a little bit more about that and what he's learned from, building like kind of these online showrooms and things like that. So we're excited. Join us on the 20th if you can, and definitely join us in Austin if you can. February 26th is when the summit kicks off, industrialmarketingsummit.com. And yeah, that's what we've got for you guys today. Super happy to see you. Hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and we'll catch up soon.
Yeah, great conversation, everyone. Thank you so much.
awesome. Thanks, y'all.